Let's rock. If you're new to the tribe, Rad is across the table, Rich is behind the mix, and my name is Yanni Ballmeister. We are Unity Gym, experts at turning driven people into athletes. This episode is brought to you by the Unify Movement System, the online program that balances strength, flexibility, and fitness in an efficient 60-minute workout so you can unleash your inner athlete. Get daily coaching by us, plus our epic gym and home UMS programs, extensive exercise library, private coaching group, and weekly coaching calls. As a valued listener, use the link in the description to get your first month free. Quickly, before we get started, I always love to give a big shout out to everyone watching on the Unity Gym YouTube channel. Remember, hit that like button. The more likes we get, the more awesome people get to see this content. And always subscribe if you like what you see. I'm super excited to announce that joining us today, we have Aaron McKenzie from Origin of Energy and Phil White from ADPT Physio.
And for those of you guys that didn't know, Aaron started work in the fitness industry in 1998, first as a martial artist, then moving into face-to-face personal training, and then small group training. Now he splits his time running Origin of Energy, both face-to-face and online, where he specializes in movement and lifestyle coaching. Aaron's managed his own gym in Bondi, coached professional athletes, taught international workshops, and certified personal trainers with his own education courses. And it's funny when I read that out because Aaron and I were living together in 1998. He's one of my oldest friends, and we moved out of home together. We were living in Harris Street in Ultimo, and then we moved to Paddington shortly after that in 1999.
I remember the reason why you two moved to Paddington.
Yeah.
We all went for lunch one day
that's
in
right.
Paddington.
Yeah.
And after about 15 minutes, we all looked at each other and said, there is a lot of really attractive women.
That's exactly why we moved there. Aaron and me.
We went straight to the real estate agent.
Yeah, remember we were moving and Mick wanted to move with us. And he goes, I can't get a car park in Paddington. And we said, well, too bad. Yeah, we're going to go to Paddington. Anyway, awesome. Good times. But Aaron and I have trained together for decades now, and Aaron's always been more flexible than I have, and he's been somebody slightly better looking, but he's been somebody that's taught me a lot about flexibility. You definitely taught me the breakthrough lessons for things like compression strength to nail my press to handstand and stuff. So when we had some questions come through from our tribe about flexibility, Yanni looked at me and said, let's get Aaron on the show. He can help us answer the questions.
We got like 4 or 5 questions that came in, and a bunch of them I just said we have to get Azza on. And quick little plug here, Aaron, anyone who's bought our 18-minute stretching routine, I've told this story a number of times in the emails that I send out. That came off the birth of us going and doing a session with Azza.
It was
like 8 years ago.
So you were there for that. It would have been just after we opened Unity Gym. So it would have been 2013.
Yeah.
And we all went over to your gym, and you took us through a session. And that was the first time that Yanni and I, with all of the way that we write our programs, where we did this movement style warm up. That wasn't just this dicky little bend down and touch your toes type warm up. And everything that we got out of that session that we did with you, when we came back, we both said
just felt
good. We felt really good, and we said we need to create a warm-up routine for our program. And it was that the warm-up routine that evolved into what we now call the 18-minute stretching routine was modeled off what we did with you that day with that warm-up.
Absolutely.
So
to say he's had an impact on our training would be an understatement. Now, I want to dive straight into this because our time is limited.
Yep.
Aaron's a very busy guy. He's quite famous on the eastern suburbs.
And his Russian wife will kill him.
That's the real problem. So we're actually going to condense 3 questions into one episode today. The first comes from Helen Madge from the UMS Online Coaching Group. She asks, what is the best method for improving flexibility? Is it static or active stretching, i.e., and why? The second question comes from Helen again, which she asks, what's the best intensity and frequency for stretching, and can you overstretch? And then the last of these 3 comes from Bronwyn Brown from the UMS Movement Mastermind group, and Bronwyn has asked, does age affect your ability to get flexible, and why? So let's kick this one off with, what do we think is the best method for flexibility?
Well, I want to hear what Aaron's got to say about that. I don't care what I think. I want to know what Aaron thinks.
And we'll throw it over to Aaron. That's right. And we've got 4 very, very insightful and clever people who've got a bit of skin in the game around the table here. So let's go.
Yeah. Strengthening. That's it.
Strengthening. Yeah.
Just get strong at that end range.
I love that
Just
you said that.
Strong there.
Yeah.
If you're strong there, you can go there.
Yeah.
That's it.
And this is what we say all the time. True flexibility cannot be achieved in the absence of strength. And what we mean by that is that the flexibility adaptation is an adaptation of the brain, unlike what most people sort of think, the notion that it's just about lengthening the muscle body itself. The muscle body is able to go elongate. You know, if you were to, Phil's used this analogy a number of times. If you were put to sleep, like on the operating table, you'd be the most flexible person. You know, you'd be able to bend and move around and this and that. Your body kind of goes like limp. You know, it's the brain's inhibition because of lack of stability and strength that restricts movement. And a really great example of that is when you stand vertically, you most likely, if you're a remotely capable person, be able to lift one leg to a 90-degree angle. And then if you were to do the same on the other side, you'd be able to mimic that movement. And there's nothing joining your left limb to your right limb in your lower extremity. So why can't you do the splits? Because your brain doesn't allow you to, except if you're Aaron. And yeah, so I think that's a really, really great way to frame it. You know,
I guess the challenge, because I know that it was the challenge for me as well, to the learning to get to where I am now with my understanding of end range strength and things like that. It's really just understanding how to strengthen your body in those end ranges. And there is a lot of confusion for the average person with that. They just don't get it. They don't understand what it is. And it's funny because the further you go down the rabbit hole of learning this stuff, when you're a coach like we are, there comes a time when it just becomes really simple. It's really easy. You just take your joint to the end range and figure out ways to strengthen it. But
and load it. And most of the time when you post a picture of yourself doing that at that level, you get absolutely slammed on social media. You can be like, oh, that's so bad for your back, or that's so dangerous, or no, you should never do that, you know. And we've just had so many back and forth arguments with people when we've posted a loaded Jefferson curl or a loaded hamstring curl or something like that. You know,
Aaron, I shouldn't say all the time, but I've seen you post many times a body weight Jefferson curl. You'll hold 40 kilos in each hand and do a Jefferson curl. I've never got that high. I've gotten to probably about 60 kilos or so, and then I got bored and started doing other things.
Just explain for everyone playing at home what that actually means. Like, what's an 80-kilo Jefferson curl?
So, well, a Jefferson curl is when you stand up straight and you're holding weights in your hands, and you intentionally go through as much flexion of the spine, trying to articulate each vertebra the whole way down, or each section of the spine. So you start with your chin, then your upper back. And
Free on when you're editing this, dig out a video of Azza from his Instagram.
And so Aaron doing his he's doing a Jefferson curl with his own body weight, and of course the devil isn't in the movement, right? The devil's in the way you got there. You know, like anybody that's going to watch this and go, I'm going to go and try a body weight Jefferson curl, you're probably going to wreck yourself.
And you've got to strengthen the whole chain.
And while we're on this, let's get the physio's perspective of what is the most important thing when someone sees that video, because we're going to get the B-roll overlay. What should you do if you're just getting started?
I mean, the body's just, so the brain particularly is really good at just protecting your body from things that it doesn't feel confident with. So your body will adapt to what you spend your time doing, but there's going to be a certain threshold with every sort of movement, every type of loading, that if you exceed that too quickly, then you know, and your structure's not prepared for it, then you're not going to end well. But yeah, so much with flexibility is about teaching your brain that movement, that particular movement is safe. So it's all about just progressively doing it and having it in the context. And I think that's why working with trainers and having someone who can guide you through it is going to be so important, because it's partly that physical adaptation, but so much of it is just that mental adaptation to trust that your body can handle it, and then get good advice about how to recover as well. Remember, with adaptation, it's stimulus then recovery, stimulus then recovery. But yeah, particularly with sorry, you go.
No, I was gonna say, because this is what we always sort of combat any negativity on social media when we post videos and pictures like that, is, you know, that's so dangerous. And I always like to say, you know, so is what the guys do at the CrossFit Games, and so is what anyone does on an NRL field, or, you know, even a basketball
gymnasts
game.
At the Olympics,
gymnasts at the Olympics. Like, it's all bloody dangerous if you can't do it.
I mean,
it's just a conditioned response.
Exactly. And the lesson in the podcast is that it's not high load, it's how you get there. Like, that's exactly what we're talking about. And remember, load here can mean weight, or it can mean range of motion, or it can mean a combination of, you know, all of the different loading variables we talk about. So but your body is amazing at dealing with what you spend your time doing. So
in just before we came on, we the boys did a 30-minute sort of workout, and there was a great discussion on the concept of the time frame that it takes to achieve the levels of things that you would likely see on someone's Instagram feed, you know, or YouTube channel. You know, people don't generally post the work; they post what they've achieved by doing the work. You know, and so people then sort of, we've got this mentality that you made a comment about. Everyone wants it now. It's the afterpay generation. You know. Get it now and worry about paying for it later.
Act now, apologize later.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I think that's really relevant when you're training, especially for flexibility.
Yeah.
You know, because flexibility, I think beyond strength, I think it's less linear to achieve. You know, you can design a really great strength program, and you know, as long as you come in and you lift a little bit more weight, it's very tangible. You know, you last week you were lifting the 10 kilo dumbbells, this week you're lifting the 12s, and your brain goes, I can feel and see and it's tangible, the progression. Whereas with flexibility, it's not so much, and there's so much that comes into play there, like previous history, you know, what your background is, how strong you are, you know, already. Like if you and it can be really, really frustrating. And a lot of people, their answer to that is, I'll just push harder. I'll just do it more, you know. And I guess that's a good segue into the next question from Helen Madge. What's the best intensity and frequency for stretching, and can you overstretch?
And
can I just start off with this? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that before we even go there, which you can start on, it's important to clarify what it is that Aaron said, because I think I very rarely use the word stretching, and I don't really hear Aaron use it that much either. I think it's important to say that we don't really do what people call stretching, like what we were doing when we were sitting on the ground and you're just sitting there. Some people might call stretching, but that's really just kind of sitting there and warming up. But it's more flexibility training, and flexibility training really is, as Aaron said, it's strength training, but it's strength training through range. And it's strength training at end ranges using lots of different things like isometric contractions, eccentrics, you know, antagonist activation, things like that. And that's not a short, like if anybody says, well, how do you do it? That's not a short answer. There's so many different ways to do it, and there's different ways for different joints and different movements and everything. But
I actually saw it could have been, one of my friends on social media wrote a post about this the other day, and he said stretching is something that unflexible people do. Flexibility training is something that people do if they want to actually get more mobile, you know. And I think that's kind of a good way of putting it. Like you see people in the gym who are really unfit and incapable stretching, you know.
Can I jump into my rant here? So one of the things that really gets me, and this is related to that question of can you overstretch, and it's this cultural idea that with all injuries that stretching is this magical cure-all. Like every time I have person come in for a physio appointment, they've got an injury and they're like, oh yeah, you know, I've got this, and you know, I'm probably just not stretching enough. Like it's always the first go-to thing that they assume is why they've become injured, and so they don't look at like the kind of big lifestyle factors. They don't look at like macro programming. They don't think about how they've done the exercise at all. It's always like, it's because I feel guilty for not stretching enough. And it's like, and I think, you know, flexibility is a wonderful thing. I'm not a particularly flexible person because it's not as relevant for my particular movement goals. But I think, you know, the pursuit of flexibility training is great. But just like with every exercise, like it's all about dosage, and enough of the right stimulus is good, and too much of any exercise at too much of an intensity is going to be damaging, and people don't really understand that flexibility is like a load that you have to adapt to. And for people who kind of come in and they're injured, they like just assume that it's got some magical property of healing. It doesn't. Like
that's right. In many cases, when you see someone who says that exact statement, it's the lack of strength that's getting them to their problems. You know, lack of stability, lack of strength.
So let's let Aaron answer. How much stretching and how intense should it be? And let's clarify, not stretching, but flexibility training. So,
well, look, it just depends on how much time they have. You know, how much time have you got to commit to yourself to work on these things, and how relevant is it for you? So a lot of the clients that I have that, you know, they can only commit, say, 5 minutes a day. Their mobility training is really their strength training. You know, unless they've got a specific imbalance or an instability that they need to work on, or a restriction that is more isolated. But otherwise, like for the majority of my clients, all I'm working on is like pull up, overhead press, horizontal pull, like bent row, push up, squat, lunge, bend. And if they can do those well through a full range of motion, they've pretty much got the mobility that they need, and they're all counterposed, like if you're pulling this way and pushing this way, you're pulling this way and you're pushing this way. Like if you've got strength there and you can do a dead hang pull up and you can press overhead into that position, then your shoulder's going to be fairly balanced in terms of that pulling and pushing balance. And then horizontally, if you can pull and push through a full range of motion in that way, and the muscles you're going to have that even cellular balance. So the recruitment patterns on both sides of the joints are going to be in a way that you've got that agonist-antagonist balance where you can keep building strength. And usually when someone's hit a plateau in strength, it's because they've got an imbalance of strength. They're too strong on one side of the joint. So every time you load the joint, it pulls to one side because that stronger muscle is trying to stabilize now. And even though it's not the one that you're trying to lift with, it's just trying to hold the joint together. So the joint feels like something's going to give, so it shuts you down. It's not going to let you go there.
Joints work in systems, and the body's really good at basically co-contracting and being like, nope.
And it's that simple thing, optimal instantaneous axis of rotation. So every joint should have equal and opposing, stability on all sides. And if it's got that, it'll get stronger. If it does have that, it's going to go.
We did a podcast just the other day. We recorded a podcast the other day with Sebastian Oreb, who's a powerlifting coach mostly. But he even commented saying, 9 times out of 10, when I get someone come to me who can already do a 220 kilo bench press and they say, how can I get stronger? I can't get any stronger. He goes, the chances 9 times out of 10, it's not do more bench.
No,
it's
you got to do the opposing muscle.
Yeah,
that's how they're going to get stronger.
That's all he does, and people are a bit weirded out. And then
it's
they go.
Like now they've got a better foundation.
Exactly.
Because now they've got something to balance it with.
Yeah.
Because your body will just shut down. It's like, no, you're not getting more strength on that side. What are you kidding?
Yeah.
It's the same with mobility. If you're really flexible on one side, like why would it go further the other way if it's tight on one side? Like you've got to have that equal and opposing strength and equal and opposing range of motion. And that's where, coming back to the question, how much time, how much time have you got, and what are your goals, and what do you want to do with it? Like, how's it going to serve you? So in terms of, like you guys, I just have hour classes with clients, and they can come once to 7 times a week or whatever. So, and in that session, we're just doing foam rolling, bit of mobility work, massage ball, mobility routine. That's the session. And then they're just doing compound movement patterns, and depending on how often they're training and how many days in a row they're training, you shift those things. But, if you can commit 10 minutes a day, you can make massive changes. But the 2 most valuable things, the dead hang for the shoulders and just traction that joint, and whatever level that works for you, and deep squatting. Like if you can choose 2 things, and then obviously a deep lunge as well to get the hip flexors balanced out in the hips, like those things, if you can just be healthy and strong in those positions and just do them every day, that they pay off hugely. But even that's somewhat limited, because obviously once you get to a certain point, you're not going to go any further, because you're not getting that opposing pressing strength, and you're not getting the opposing, like for a squat, you're going into hip flexion, so you've got to get that hip flexor strength in the opposite way. So it's you can do it very simply, or you can make it like me. It's a lifestyle. It's something I do every day, and I'm doing every day, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I really like what you said just before we came in, when you're out on the gym floor, about how you try and touch each of the different types of stimulus for your body throughout the week. And I think that's a really important thing to understand for Helen, where it might take a certain amount of work to get to a certain level of flexibility or strength. But as we talked a lot about before with strength maintenance, it is often you just need to do a little bit, but consistently. And that consistency is what kills people. Is they just they train hard for sprints, and then your body adapts over time.
And it's going to mold around that, and then everything else will fall apart. So you've got to be able to touch on it every week. And I always try and get clients to work with a weekly checklist. So a lot of my online clients are like, I just want this set program. Tell me exactly what I have to do. It's like, what are your goals? Okay, here is a checklist to get to those goals. How these things go together is really up to you, because I need to know, I'm not in your body. I don't know how you feel every day, how you wake up, in your body. And if you wake up feeling good, then you're going to be able to train harder. But if you wake up feeling bad and my program says you have to do this and you injure yourself, that's a bad program, man. And that's not what you want to stick to. You want to learn how to work with that weekly checklist. So what is your turnaround on squats? Do you need 48 hours recovery? Do you need 72 hours recovery before you can actually have a decent attempt at it again? And all your mobility gains are strength gains. So if I improve my side split or my overhead position or my front split or my pancake, it's because I've just gotten that little bit stronger at that M range. And now it's easier for me to go there. And it's not just being able to, like you said, someone, you can knock them out, put them on a table and then stretch them. because you've got to have control there. So you've got to be able to use it. And that's like, we've gone through, like the press to handstand is a perfect example of something that if you do it, attack it with a pull-push legs approach, that movement becomes so much easier and it becomes attainable. So what I mean is that, like, if you're doing a hang off a bar and then doing the side straddle and then raising up into that pike, then that's the position in reverse, but a pull version. And the push version is the actual drill that you're doing for the press to handstand. And the leg version would be that pancake going down and going through that position. But you've got that cellular balance from all sides of the joints and loading them both ways. So you've made it strong in terms of the hip flexors on one side, strong in terms of the glutes and the abductors, adductors. Every angle is kind of covered by a pull press leg approach to mobility. And it seems weird, but it's just that cellular loading coming from all angles with any movement and opposing it, as opposed to just doing the one movement by itself and hoping it works out.
Well, that's exactly what we did to get our press to handstand, which because I don't know if you remember, but when I was trying to learn a press to handstand, I was coming to you going, I don't even get how you do it. Like, I can't even put weight in my hands. And you explained that to me, get strong hanging and getting your legs up to the bar, use straddles, and then go down and express it with a push and do it, all this. And that's how I got my press to handstand, from following that approach, and which led to our press to handstand program that we've trained people in around the world. But I think if we talk about the dosage and the intensity, because everything that you've said is spot on with what we do and what we believe. But if we talk about like somebody like Helen, who she's one of our members who, when you see her, she's awesome. She's a really high achiever. She's into it. She's got a really good body composition. She's a strong person. She's done a lot of movement in the past. She commits to 5-6 days a week. Again, for anybody that's listening, Aaron's had a major impact on the way that we do things, because I've watched so much of what he does on Instagram. I've trained with him so much over the years. I've asked him so many questions, and it's really for the flexibility that we do in the UMS. The biggest influences have been Aaron and Joachim Hilderson, the guy that Joachim online. I trained with him online for about a year. He came over here and did a workshop with us.
I would say Ian King had a huge influence, but that was only because he made it really clear that we needed to stretch a lot more.
That's true.
He didn't necessarily teach us how to do it.
But
he cracked the eye.
So influence, yes, but if you think about time spent with a person, it's really Aaron and Joachim that I spent the time with. And what it's led to with our program is, it's this way that we touch all the major movements, like front splits, pike, middle splits, flexion, extension, external rotation, internal rotation. So all the major movements of the joints once a week, but we do a bit of volume on it. It's always about strength. It's always either isometrics, eccentrics, or end range strength. And from my understanding is that's similar to what you do. Like I've seen you talk about how you basically you'll do each position once a week, where you do it loaded, and then
you might vary that. So like if you're building just strength, you might do a spectrum of reps and loading variables. For example, like you're doing your heavier strength, like just pure strength work, and then you're doing a higher volume that's kind of not quite strength endurance, but it's heading that way out of hypertrophy, out of muscular development. And then if you're getting that spectrum, like you're not leaving anything off the table. So for example, if you just get your body to adapt to 3 to 5 reps in everything you do, what happens outside of that? You get weak. But if you just do endurance work all the time, what happens when you start to put really heavy load in that structure? It just doesn't. The fiber types have been left unconditioned. So my approach is, like as you become more well-rounded, is to stimulate all those different conditioning responses, even within a week. Like you have these programs where people go, I'm just doing heavy strength work now for a month. Then I'm just going to do, this range for a month, and then I'll just do this for a month. And that can work for a specific goal, but you've always got to remember that as soon as you focus too much on one thing, you're letting go of something else. So if you want to try and maintain, it doesn't mean you have to have high volume in everything, but you at least touch on it. So for example, if you're doing pull-ups and you are in a phase of where you're doing more volume, or you're doing, like you're in a hypertrophy phase, you might still chuck a couple of heavy rep, like singles, doubles, triples, whatever in there, just to maintain that ability in the muscle to fire in that way and to recruit those fiber types. Because when it comes down to mobility, it's not just the tissue range of motion, it's a tissue range of motion in terms of all those fiber types responding to those positions. And when people get injured, it's not because they can't necessarily do that range. They just mightn't have the right fiber type strength in that range. So they might be able to do it really slow and controlled, but then the second they go and play sport where it's an explosive movement and they're having to recruit those fiber types in that range, then they're in trouble because they haven't conditioned it. So, like if you really want the range it's all about how the range feels, not just, you could do a slow warm up and get yourself into this position, but then, if you're an athlete or if you want to be able to perform or you want to be able to kind of express that on a more regular basis, then it's got to be strong there in terms of it just feeling good all the time.
It's interesting you say that. When I first worked with Ben Pekulski, who was a professional bodybuilder, sort of retired from bodybuilding now, he said the same thing. I asked him about program splitting and things like that, and he said, look, towards the more recently I've gone to, doing different rep ranges each day on different body parts because I find that it just maintains everything much better. But he was at an elite level, so. And
I think when you're younger, you can tolerate a lot more like heavy conditioning in one way.
Yeah.
But I think as you get older, you've got to try and keep everything alive. You've got the three things that happen after 35. One, it's easy to get injured. Two, it's harder to get results. And three, you decondition faster.
I thought you were going to say three, it's harder to get laid.
That too. but it's those three compounding factors. So if you don't have something in your routine regularly, you're going to decondition that very quickly. And you're more vulnerable to injury. So if you don't stay conditioned and then you're not as alert, not as, and your recovery's not as quick, it's just, this is what happens. This is why you see the dad bod out there. It's because they go and play a weekend game of sport, they're deconditioned and they get injured. And now it's like, well, and then their repertoire of what they can include in their week just gets smaller and smaller and smaller to the point they just give in.
Which is a great segue for Bronwyn Brown's question, which is the last question to tackle today. Does age affect your ability to get flexible and why?
Well, it definitely does. In terms of what I just said. It's really those three factors that are going to limit you. And if you don't respect them, you're going to get into trouble. So you have to work with them. You have to learn how to listen to the body. You have to manage that recovery. So, that's why to me, if you're going to train, do the whole lifestyle, get to bed on time, eat good food, stay hydrated, create loving relationships around you, express that love to the people that you care about, that you really want to know that they have that connection as well for them. And you build that into your daily life. You'll feel more relaxed. You look after your finances. Don't get yourself into a position where you're stressed about money. And then the training works.
Stress as you age is kind of like money. If you invest it right, it compounds. Whereas with age, the stress compounds on your body, and things have a larger impact. And that's what I would say to everyone out there training over the age of sort of 35. The warm-ups matter a lot more. A lot more.
I used to watch people warm up and think, come on, just get on with it, And now it's like, okay, I'll just take the time because it's just not worth having a little twinge. A little twinge just costs you a workout. And just the feeling, once you've had a couple of decent injuries in your body and you get one of those and you know what it means. You just feel this oh my God, man, it's just going to take me a week to get over this or longer or, my neck's going to be tight, my back's going to be tight for a couple of days because I felt that little twinge. But then if you warm up, and you just take the time and the value of doing strength training, like bodybuilding style training through a full range of motion, man, that is the most valuable thing. Slow, controlled movements through a full range of motion and just progressively getting stronger, man, that pays off. If my tool for conditioning people, that is it there. And even if you didn't have time to do a full warm-up, you just do, your warm-up would be really light sets of those movements through a full range of motion, really let the blood supply getting in there, feeling good, getting tissue activation, and then gradually increasing that intensity works so well with low risk movements, whereas you've just trying too hard to do extreme things too quickly. And that's the same, people with mobility stuff, people want to get to that extreme range and they just push it too hard and they're just not ready yet. And they're not doing the counter poses to it. So if you're doing heavy end range flexion in the spine in a Jefferson, you better have extension strength there to be able to handle it. And if it's not there, it's only going to end in joint instability.
Yeah.
Because you're just trying to get one side of the joint too strong or too mobile.
There's no shortcuts.
No.
And the other two things I would say for anyone training over 35 trying to achieve high levels of flexibility, consider all of the different stress mechanisms in your life, because they have a really big effect on you and your body at that state. So if you're not sleeping, you said it before, if you're not recovering properly, if you're not eating right, if you're really, really stressed through emotional, like work related, career, finances, relationship, that's going to have a major impact. What was it that Tony was saying that he does with his clients? He does heart rate variability every day to make sure that people are on point and ready to take on a big session. Otherwise, they do a light session. You got to listen to your body a lot more as you get older.
And that's a key thing. Like, training is really about knowing what to do on a day.
Yeah, that's right.
And like I try and encourage people to do stuff every day, but do what's right on that day. Because like I said, as you get older, you decondition faster. So you've got to be consistent. But you've got to be consistent with something that's not going to hurt you. And like you said about recovery, your training is only as good as your recovery. If you can't recover from it, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's only, all it is just self-mutilation.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. You've got to be responsible. Like, you've got to be able to respond to that stress. And if you're doing all the right things, eating well, relaxing, chilling out, looking after yourself, then training works.
Yeah.
But if you're just focused on the actual physical part of stretching and just overdoing that but ignoring everything else, it can't work. The body is an integrated system.
Yeah, they work, like we've talked about the negative spirals and positive spirals. Like when you do get an injury, and as a physio, this is what I'm always trying to do, is stop that downward spiral of then you're not as active, you don't sleep as well, you don't eat as well because you don't want to. So it's like it's all about trying to put the brakes on that. And I really like your approach there of you having that big checklist, so you don't get so focused on like just that one thing. Because when people have an injury, they're just so focused on, I can't do that goal that I was working after. It's like, well, what about the other?
Exactly.
The rest of your life.
Like that. Probably my career is built on rebuilding people. And if I've had any kind of claim to fame, it's been working with elite level athletes that are highly broken, and helping them understand how they can get back on track. Now, and the key thing is, stop focusing on what you can't do.
Yeah.
What else life has to offer.
Thanks so much for joining us again, Aaron. It's always a pleasure to have you on here, bro. And we will definitely get you on the show again in the future. For anybody listening who wants to connect with Aaron, Aaron can be found on Instagram at Origin of Energy. For honestly, some of the most inspiring stuff that I find on Instagram, his views.
Even just because half of his training and videos are done in his Speedos.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I just like this.
He's an amazing guy. And if you want to book for an in-person or on an in-person session with Aaron over at Bondi, or an online session with Aaron, you can go to originofenergy.com. And I cannot impress on you enough just how valuable that will be. If that's something that you're interested in at all, I guarantee you will get something out of it. But make sure you're ready to do the work, because he's going to give you some really great advice on how you can turn your body into a healthier organism. And thanks, Phil, for joining us again.
That was great.
Yeah, always insightful.
And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.
See you soon.
Cheers.